Hey everybody, Chapter 8, Lesson 2. We're still in the Roaring Twenties and we're talking about how our culture identity of our country, who we are as a people, how that changes over time. And we talked yesterday a little bit about the economy, we talked about foreign policy, isolationism. Today we're going to take a look at how the lives of working Americans change. What happens to the kinds of jobs Americans have, our day-to-day experience in work. We're going to talk about what we spend our money and our time on. And we're going to take a look at some of the conditions of the average American and some ethnic minority groups that are in America during the 1920s, during the Jazz Age, the Roaring Twenties. So what we need to understand is that even though we had a second industrial revolution that went from 1870 all the way to about 1900, that doesn't necessarily mean that we were using the kinds of factories and processes that we think of now when we think of like the Utz potato chip factory or the Harley Davidson factory. What happens in the 1920s, between 1915 and 1929, what happens in that time frame is something a little different, in that all of a sudden we begin to see more and more mass production done in a new way. We've been mass producing things for a long time, making a lot of something, but by making a lot of something with machinery, then we're able to do it even faster. A human being can only, twist a screw so fast, but if we can find a machine to do the work, then we can have a number of changes to our society and our lives as workers, as people doing the job. So if we have a bunch of factories starting in the 1920s that are really using mass production with machinery, then what we're going to see is a shorter workday and a shorter work week. We're going to be able to see these companies make more than ever in terms of goods and profit, which means that we as workers can get even higher pay. And we'll begin to see in the 1920s, we'll begin to see prices fall because of what we had talked about in the past. When you make a lot of something, the price will fall, economy of scale. So we're going to really begin to see these new industries use mass production. It's really going to change the lives of American workers. And let me give you an example, a case study of how we use mass production in factories. And we're going to use the Ford Motor Company with Henry Ford, the founder of the Ford Motor Company, and the Model T, a car that he makes. You see, Henry Ford had made tons of cars before he makes what we call and what we know now as the Model T. The trick is every time he made a new car, a Model A, a Model B, a Model C, he gets better at making more of them, faster, more efficiently. What he finally stumbles upon by the Model T is the idea of having the car move down the assembly line and the person stay stationary so that you can do a task faster, since you're not walking over here to get this and then walking back and then you're putting this on and then you're walking over here to get this and then you're putting it on. Instead, it's all right in front of you. The car and the parts come to you. You do what you need to do right away, and then they go right on down the line to somebody else. This cuts all the unnecessary motion in a factory to a minimum, meaning you can produce more quickly. And he began to time things. Exactly how long should it take you to pick up the wheel, put the wheel on the car, tighten the bolt, move along. Exactly how long it should take you to pick the door up, put it on the car, bolt it in. And they began to time other things too, like what happens if you have to go to the bathroom. Well, then they have a set time limit for how long you have to leave the assembly line, get to the bathroom, go to the bathroom, and get back to the assembly line, because you're slowing it all down when you're not there and someone else has to do your work. It took him a long time to kind of refine this process again and again and again and again, but he gets it. By the Model T, he is producing so many by 1925 that you've got one of these cars made every 10 seconds. It really helps lower the price of these cars, so Ford is able to sell tons of them, raises workers' pay. Being a Ford employee was a big deal. You got a really good pay. And the Model T popularizes the automobile for the average everyday person. It becomes something we see all over the place. It's a car that's just recognizable. It's known as the Tin Lizzie or the Flivver. It has nicknames in our culture because so many people have these cars in our society. So this is just one example of how Ford is able, and the mass production is able to change the lives of workers, give us more pay, shorter work weeks, shorter work days. And that also means that if we have higher pay, we can buy more things with that higher pay. And not just buy things with the money that we have, but actually start to think that we can pay off debt over time. Think about it. If I'm getting paid $1 a week, it's not a lot, $1 a week, and someone says to me, "Hey man, why don't you buy, I don't know, this TV? It costs $10." I'm going to look at that and go, I don't know that I can do that because I got to eat, I got to pay rent, I got to, I don't think I can do that. I got kids I got to take care of. I need that dollar to take care of these things that are really important to me. But if all of a sudden, instead of earning $1 a week, I was earning $7 a week, and someone said to me, "Hey man, buy this thing, it's $10. I might say, well, I don't have enough money I can't really buy that, but I'd like to. I have $7. I could pay it off over time. And when people begin to say this, that my pay is rising, I could pay this off over time, then banks and businesses begin to do something new too. They begin to issue credit or loans. And what they say is that you're getting paid more, so you can pay this back over time. That means we're going to loan you the extra money you need because we know that you can pay it back because you've got a job that pays good money, so you should be able to pay us back this loan. So the bank will give me the loan I need, the credit I need, the missing $3 that I need to buy that good. And here's the trick. We're buying stuff that we don't need. We're buying consumer goods. We don't need fancy disposable racers. We don't need fancy irons or tissues or radios or cars, all of which so many are bought on credit. We don't need these things. But because we can buy them, we get them. We begin to see society change, our culture change, as more and more people have access to things like radios or cars. Big-time events, sporting and political, are broadcast on the radio. News stations that we know now on TV, like NBC and CBS, they are initially radio stations. We see airlines begin to develop because people are able to afford airline tickets. It's just the beginning of a change in who we are as a people. But I don't want you to think that everyone is able to get these loans, that everyone is able to buy these consumer goods, because it's not the case. Not everybody was getting those shorter work days, shorter work weeks, and higher pay. A lot of people were still struggling in the 1920s, even though we call it the Jazz Age or the Roaring '20s. For example, African Americans lost those factory jobs when white soldiers came back and took them, and we had those race riots. We still have Native Americans that are isolated on reservations out in the middle of nowhere, where there's no work, no factories, no railroad access, no health care, no schools. So it's a difficult situation. We have immigrants that we know are going to be taking lower paying jobs. They're not going to be seeing the best work that's out there. And we know that farmers are going to struggle, as they always have in American society, as there are changes to how farms operate. I think farmers it's an interesting case study, the poor farmers. I mean, think about it. The Second Industrial Revolution, the Progressive Era, we see all this technology and science advance. We see all kinds of awesome changes in things like fertilizer or equipment or how and where you farm. A lot of awesome things that allow farmers to increase production. But the problem there is that as you're increasing production, if there's not as much demand for a good, then the prices are going to fall too much. So our government says, you know what we need to do? We need a tariff. We need to stop foreign countries from selling their food in America so that American farmers can sell their food to Americans. Well, the problem with that is that all of a sudden, the other countries get into a tariff war with us. Remember, we talked about tariffs rising one after the other after the other. We raise it, they raise it, we raise it, they raise it. And so what you ended up with was that American farmers couldn't sell overseas either. So you have higher production with less demand, meaning low prices. It was just a mess. So that the Tariff Act, Fordney-McCumber Act doesn't work. Farmers are producing more, they're suffering. So I think that's a pretty quick summary of some of the ways in which work and life was changing in the 1920s for a lot of Americans, although not all, as we just pointed out. And we'll talk about this more in class when we get together.